Hi, everyone. I'm John Gallant, Enterprise Consulting Director with Foundry, and I'm also the CIO Brand Manager for CIO.com around the world. And I'm really pleased that you're joining us today, along with my colleagues from the CIO Executive Council, whom I'll introduce in a moment, to look at some of the highlights from the 22nd State of the CIO Survey, which is a survey that we do every year that looks at the CIO role and how it's evolving, where CIOs are spending their time, how they're working with other parts of the organization, and what challenges and opportunities they're facing today, and how they're trying to help drive their companies forward through intelligent use of technology. As I mentioned, this is some of the highlights from this survey, which is a very in-depth piece of reporting each year. We'll be providing the full survey to folks who ask for it and folks who are interested in it. And I also want to let you know that as we go along, we'll be happy to take questions as well. We probably won't be able to take every question, but we're happy to take as many questions as we can along the way. So just so you can see what this survey entails, as I mentioned, we've been doing this for 22 years, and it's a large survey. So we have 1,038 respondents. Over 800 of those are identified as the senior-most technology person within their organization. And you can see the range of titles there, from CIOs to VPs, CTOs. It's a mix of industries. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. It's also a mix of regions. So we're getting input from CIOs around the world on this. A little less than half from North America, about 25% from EMEA, and 30% from APAC. And you can see that this is also a mix of company sizes as well, with the ranges all the way from less than 100 up to 5,000 plus employees. And as I mentioned, a range of industries. The largest industry represented in the survey at 15% is manufacturing, then high-tech, financial services, and you can see from there on. So we're getting a great mix of representation from different size companies, different vertical industries, different parts of the world. That gives us a great snapshot of what's going on with IT leaders and their IT organizations in this day and age. So what I want to do now is I want to introduce a longtime colleague of mine, Tim Scannell. Tim is Director of Strategic Content and Operations with the CIO Executive Council. Tim, let me introduce you, and you can introduce our guests.
All right, thanks, John. It's a pleasure to join you, our two IT leadership panelists, and of course, all those who are attending live in this very special Foundry IDC CIO Executive Council webcast, which is the first public presentation of the annual State of the CIO Survey results. The two IT leaders joining in on the presentation and discussion, both CIO Executive Council members, are Gary Jeter, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at TruStone Financial Credit Union, and Jo Abernathy, Chief Information Officer at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. So thanks very much for attending today. You know, John, since this is the 22nd year of this influential survey, since it's been conducted, I thought it'd be a good excuse to fire up the DeLorean and travel back a couple of decades to 2003 and look at some of the top concerns noted in that year's research. I'm just a little curious, and you know how I love road trips. Well, back then, one of the top challenges noted in the survey results was partnering with business units and delivering the greatest value to the organization. And 2002-2003 was really a time of tight budgets for IT, but the big focus for leaders back then was prioritizing demands from the various business units and aligning IT with business goals. Sounds like a bit of deja vu, doesn't it?
It does indeed, Tim. Yeah.
Things stay the same, they change. This was also the year the security concerns and spending moved from the bottom half of the previous year's results to number 4 in the 2003 lineup, a big difference from today's top concerns in the lists. 2002 and 2003 were also the years where critical leadership skills of strategic thinking and planning jumped from 46% of the respondents saying it's important in the previous year to 76% of the executives in 2003 noting that these were absolutely essential. So you might say that the 2003 State of the CIO survey marked a defining shift in IT leadership thinking from functional and operational to more strategic and business focused. As Doc Brown said to Marty McFly in Back to the Future, "Great Scott, And with that, John, I'll give it back to you to get back into this year's survey
Thank you,
results.
Tim. Thanks for taking us in the Wayback Machine to the 2003, 2002 survey. You know, many of these issues are similar, and we're always looking at the CIO role in terms of how can it contribute the most to the organization, how can it help drive innovation, not just support an operational role. And we'll talk about some of those issues, including security as well. I wanted to start off by taking a look at budgets because I guess I'm fascinated by this result. When we asked, what's your expectation of your overall IT budget in 2023, we see that 56% of the respondents said their budget's going to increase, 35% said remain the same, and 9% said their budget would decrease. These results are actually very similar to last year's results, with the minor change that only 9% see a decrease, where 10% did last year. Now, we'll talk about that. But in the light of a pending, what we're hearing so often about a pending recession, I want to explore with our CIOs their views on that. But some of the information behind that, top reasons that the tech budgets will increase in 2023, need for security improvements. In fact, you'll see security echoed again and again in answers throughout this survey, and we'll talk some more about that. Need to upgrade outdated IT infrastructure, dealing with technology debt, trying to move things forward, application modernization, investing in new skills and talents, product innovation. When we ask that small group, that 9%, why their budgets are going to decrease, economic instability and uncertainty rises to the top with that group, but we didn't see that with the other group. Company finances, so company-specific things that might cause a decrease. Reduced employee headcount might account for that. But I want to ask Jo, I'll start with you and then get Gary's impression. What's your reaction to these numbers here? Do you think that CIOs are being overly optimistic with their budgets, given the very real possibility of a recession?
That's a great question, John. You know, I think that when I looked at the results, I wasn't terribly shocked by it. I know in our organization, we always have pressure to reduce our operating budget. And as our environment gets more complex, larger, more distributed, more partners, we can't go up in headcount commensurate with that complexity. So we're always trying to focus on automation and ways to sort of flatten the curve on operations. And I don't expect that pressure to go away. But I do think in spite of economic concerns, I think the results may indicate that enterprises are kind of taking the long view on tech investments and really viewing them as key to either driving down operational costs or driving up revenue, or both. And so I think executives are placing their bets on those returns from tech. I think that the offshoot of that is IT organizations are going to be under more pressure to demonstrate real outcomes and return on investment.
Yeah, Gary, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with Jo, absolutely. I think, I can speak to TruStone, and I think this is common throughout a lot of the financial industry. The view is that I believe that technology is recession-proof, right? And so my budget this year, as far as OpEx grew, part of that was from consolidating IT spend into technology, into IT. But then also looking at what are some new capabilities that we can bring forward for a member experience, so that when you look at technology, you see things about driving productivity, better leveraging it, but then also the opportunity to some of the advanced analytics and things like that to be able to retain customers, target new customers. So technology, and I think executives are essentially viewing it, like Jo said, the long game and growing investment there. So it doesn't surprise me too much, and that's what we're experiencing here.
And Gary, real quickly, you mentioned this term recession-proof, which actually in one of the major research organizations recently was talking about this and said that they felt that IT budgets were recession-proof given the importance of tech to the business today. Jo, would you agree with that phrase, that IT is recession-proof these days?
To some degree, yes. But I also think that it's unrealistic to think that we won't have pressures around hiring. Even for us, I know we had to scale back on things like training and travel, which I cannot remember the last time we had to do that as a company. Now, we had some unique challenges for us, medical expense related to COVID, either directly or indirectly, that we did not anticipate would go on as long as it did. But I think there's certain aspects of the tech investment that are going to persist and be recession proof. But I don't think it's going to be unreasonable for our executives to ask us, again, to flatten that growth curve and to do more with less.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tim, any input on this from you?
Yeah. First of all, I think recession-proof is you can define it however way you want to. I think it's more like recession-sensitive. We don't know what's going to happen in 23, and certainly it's going to impact IT spending and reprioritization of whatever you're doing this year. One of the things I'd like to go back to is, John, you mentioned that technical debt, and both Joe and Gary said, taking a long view on technology and what you're doing this year. A lot of what we saw back in COVID, COVID was those years are tough, and we're still trying to get out of that, and who knows what's around the corner. But it showed some of the weaknesses in our technology, whether it's mobile, whether it's collaborative, and certainly in infrastructure. A lot of our members are now involved in these massive infrastructure restructuring and modernization projects that will take years. And I'm wondering if that's going to eat up a lot of that budget and the technical debt going forward with the IT organization. Jo, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right on. And I meant to mention that earlier. When I looked at the results, if you think about where we are in general in technology and with CIOs, I think a few years ago, we reached this major inflection point of the cloud. And so we're looking at what do we need to refactor to move to the cloud? If you just want to host it in the cloud, that doesn't get you much benefit, but really looking at your application suite and figuring out where you can benefit. But that's real work, to truly refactor your applications and move them and figure out what's going to be retired and it's just not worth the squeeze. And so the fact that all of us have been wrestling with that, and I know in my organization, it's largely been grassroots off the side of the desk. My intention for next year is to try to get a more formal program to accelerate our future state. But I imagine everybody's dealing with that. And I think from time to time, we sort of go through these major changes in technology where people are reassessing what they have, looking to the future and trying to reconcile it. So that makes perfect sense to me that's where we're seeing those investments.
And Gary, what about you? The word, when you use it, say debt, you're in the financial industry, it brings up the horrible clouds of what may be. But in terms of technical debt and what you have to do in terms of modernization, do you align with Jo, what Jo's doing on her side?
Yeah, somewhat. I would say within our organization, we have kind of dialed back on the cloud as far as moving the cloud. We have a cloud environment, but we're actually investing back into refreshing a lot of our data center, our compute and storage actually next year. So that's a big piece of the growth. And the idea is, rather than moving everything to the cloud, it's exactly what Jo was saying. There's benefit. We want to take a hybrid, very purposeful approach when we step into that. So we're investing in other parts of modernizing our technology architecture. So APIs, reusable APIs, our data strategy, as well as looking at enhancing security.
Great.
Yeah,
And
I'd
Tim,
love to get back to that cloud issue, because that seems to be a lot of people doing that, is dialing back on cloud. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, you really teed things up when you talked about priorities, and I want to spend a couple of moments talking about two slides in here. Two things in particular that we look at is, we ask CIOs, what are you working on today? What are the key things you're working on today? But we also ask, what do you want to be working on in 3 years? And I'll go through these two slides. But when I look at them, I'm struck by how today it's very operationally oriented. And in 3 years, it really looks that we want to be into things that are more business and innovation oriented, and that tension of how to get there. But when we look at what folks are working on today, as I mentioned before, security is at the top of the list. Improving IT operations and systems performance, managing infrastructure and applications. So you can see that 3 of the top 4 here are what I would consider to be very operationally focused. When we ask about 3 years from now, where do you want to be spending your time? Driving business innovation, number 1. Redesigning business processes, number 2. Aligning IT with IT initiatives with business goals. You can see the mix really changes. So I'd love to hear, and Gary, we'll start with you. I'd love to hear your reaction to what you see here, that tension, and then really get a sense from your organization perspective, what is it that you're prioritizing right now and deprioritizing?
Yeah, I mean, so when I look at the results across the board, I think when you look at what they're focusing on as far as CIO from an ops performance perspective, you have to earn the right to innovate, right? So you need to make sure that you have good operational excellence, that you're delivering upon the kind of basic securities, the blocking and tackling, and perhaps that's part of the responses around those areas. And then as you resolve from that, you move up the value chain as far as driving the business strategies and things like that. Within my organization or within TruStone, one of the things, and I think this might be true across the financial industry, there have been thousands and thousands of fintechs driving innovation and being able to keep up with that and leverage it in the member experience or customer experience. You really have to have a dynamic architecture to be able to pull it in. So for us, part of the focus is, yes, we're focusing on operational excellence, but a good portion of 2023 is going to be about delivering different experiences, removing friction from our members or customers, depending what angle you're going from, and from their financial experiences. And I think that's pretty common in the financial industry.
Yeah, and I want to explore that customer experience piece in a second. But Jo, what's your reaction to those priorities, and what are you prioritizing and deprioritizing for your organization?
You know, Gary and I had a brief conversation about the survey results last week, and I was telling him I was a little surprised that across the board, in terms of focus and investment, security continued to just take a top slot again and again in the survey. And certainly security is and will continue to be extremely important in the healthcare industry, like the financial industry. But I feel like we've matured that so well. Our investment is really pretty flat in security going forward. For us, we're so behind on really advanced digital capabilities for service that's where we're getting a lot of pressure. And I think the enterprise, not right or wrong, they sort of assume we're handling security in the background. So we do a lot of benchmarking to show them relative to our peers, what's our spend, where's our capability roadmap, what are the top 2 or 3 things we're going to be tackling. But I think that's one of the wonderful things about being a CIO, and one of the things that's extremely challenging about being the CIO is you have to advance the basics all the time, whether it's dealing with legacy tech or security or operations. And the more our environments grow and become complex, that becomes a serious headwind and heavy lift. So how do you do that in a cost-effective manner and be able to swivel chair and show your business partners that you can help lead in innovation and business opportunity? That's what makes the job tough, but it's also what makes the job really interesting.
Yeah. Tim, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just looking at that slide, that the future focus on business innovation, if you look way down the bottom at that last point, managing IT crises, 15% of the people said, this is going to be my innovative step forward for 23. I mean, this sounds like a lot of firefighting to me. Is this going to take away from the focus on these other things we talked about just a few minutes ago, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's not too surprising to me that it's at the bottom of the list as far as future focus. So if you focus on those operational excellence, you're not just fighting fires, you're actually solving root cause issues, and so that you're moving up the list. So driving that business innovation, redesigning business processes, and actually driving a better customer experience, I think, is the area. Yeah. Back to Jo, one of the things I would say in the financial industry, security is always going to be front and center, right? And so, cyber criminals have us financials in their crosshairs all the time. And so, and it is the foundation for our customers' trust or our members' trust to be able to say, hey, we're bringing our money to you, we're bringing our data to you, you need to protect that on our behalf. And once you have a breach or anything like that, I think it's devastating. And we always have security top of mind as far as investments.
Great. So, Gary, I really liked your phrase. We have to earn the right to innovate, and there's a lot of work to do in order to get into that position. One of the areas that I wanted to explore more in depth with you is we asked readers about customer experience. We know from our CIO surveys that customer experience is always a top issue that CIOs are focused on. It just keeps increasing in importance. And we're also seeing employee experience in the surveys as becoming an ever more important part. I think particularly with hybrid work, remote work, making that experience better for people. So here we asked, what are the ways that you're using technology to improve the customer experience? And I won't spend a tremendous amount of time on these. I'll let you look at these as we go forward. But I'd love to know from Jo, we'll start with you. When you think about customer and employee experience, what are the things that you're working on? What are the critical priorities within those areas for your organization?
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, really focused on our digital capabilities around service for our members is really key for us. I think this is always a good topic for CIOs to be focused on because table stakes around service and customer expectations continue to go up. And also it can be a key differentiator for your business. I know that every CIO knows that individuals go home and they have this fabulous frictionless experience somewhere, and they expect that to be extended to the corporate world and to your customer base. So I think that's an area where we all need to focus and can never afford to get behind on, as we did. And so we're trying to double down and really shore up some of the gaps that we have there. It's not only from a customer experience perspective, but certainly from a cost perspective. Extreme lower price point to do it in a digital manner as opposed to people calling the call center.
Yeah, makes sense. Gary, what about for you?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. One of the things I would say is, or to add to that around customer experience is, fintechs, what's happening in the financial industry. So a lot of, over the last 5-10 years, a lot of really innovative fintechs have really sprung to the top, and they're always producing new things, much faster than a lot of corporate shops can do. So having a structure in place to be able to say, how do I frictionlessly embed these new innovative companies that are coming up into our member experience or customer experience. I keep saying member because that's what we call them in the credit union space, but customer experience to be able to remove that friction. And that's challenging, right? Because if you bring a bunch of things together, it could turn into Frankenstein, right? So making sure that those things dovetail together. And I think that's true in a lot of industries as well.
And Gary, what about employee experience? What's the focus there?
That's huge as well, right? So as much friction as we can take out of the employee experience, they can focus more on the customer. So the whole swivel chair type aspect, looking at, today within TruStone, we do have issues relative, actually we have a lot of issues relative to manual processes, typing from one system to the other. So again, what can we automate? How do we take out that friction? And not only is it a productivity gain, but it also is a better member experience because they can focus on the customer, they can focus on those members and build those relationships.
Yeah, it makes sense. Tim, thoughts on this?
Thank you, John. Yes, I do have a few thoughts. So as someone who gets really annoyed at being on hold unless it's some really good elevator music, I think that the customer experience, internal and external, are very important. And what it's coming down to is the solutions we have right now come down to, let's have more collaborative software for internal users. Let's have dashboards for our partners and our customers so they can see what's happening and they can get more involved in the process. That's scratching the surface. What we're finding now is that things like observability and internet reliability, what's the total experience, the environment you're presenting to your people, especially internally. You're working with a hybrid work environment. It's not just a comfortable chair and giving them a break every 15 minutes and maybe a cupcake. You have to look at that observability. How do you flatten that whole playing field between people in the office and people outside the office?
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. I like the cupcake idea, though. I wouldn't mind a cupcake myself. So I also wanted to ask about this. We talked about the overall budget before. We also ask about this issue of technology dollars controlled by IT versus other parts of the organization. So we can see overall that about 43, according to the respondents to this survey, 43% of all technology dollars are controlled by IT. That's bigger in North America. About half of that is almost 50% in North America. And we can see that all the respondents feel that these numbers will increase over the next 3 years. But Joe, we'll start with you on this. When you look at this slide, how do you react? Does it surprise you? Does it aggravate you? How are you coordinating with departments that have spend in IT? What works and what doesn't work? What's the reality on the ground of this budget issue?
I would say it did surprise me and it did aggravate me as well. I think that, I've been around a long time and I've seen organizations pop up outside of IT. One in particular for us was data and analytics. And, as much as I've tried to make some of that successful and be supportive, it's like I've seen the movie before and I know the ending, and my team has a starring role to clean up on aisle 9. And I just think it's really underestimated what it takes to lead IT. And I think that just like being a CFO or a chief marketing officer, you have to have that relevant experience. I feel very strongly that CIOs can't be accountable in title, but not in practice. It just doesn't work. I know for us, we've had a number of failures outside of IT that have really led to much more centralization of IT functions and correspondingly the budget and the control of technology dollars, which we do consolidate in our company. And I think that much like running IT, managing technology vendors and contracts, short-term and long-term, and having strategies around those, it's just not something that typically is done very well in business areas. They just don't have the experience and frankly, the failures and the scars to learn from it. I just think that this always sub-optimizes technology, even if it's unintentional. So I am not a fan of distributing tech. Now I understand there's, super large companies where of course you would do that, and every company is a little bit different, but in general, I am not a fan.
Yeah, and I'm struck, and I want to get your view, Gary, but I'm struck when we look at the concern about security, when we think about things like customer experience. I don't understand how we can do those things well in a distributed fashion and how we organize those things. But Gary, what do you see when Joe was aggravated? Are you angry? No. Are you? How do you feel about this when you look at this slide? See if we can push it up a notch.
Before joining TruStone, I worked in a very, very large organization, and similar experience that Joe has, where essentially a business unit would look at the IT rate card. That IT rate card, a vendor would come to them and say, "Hey, we can deliver it cheaper." When in reality, they're not really delivering it cheaper. They creates a lot of tech debt. And then when there are issues, it ultimately IT has to come in and basically rectify it and solve it. So I'm sure a lot of the CIOs out there know what I'm talking about, because that's very, 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 very painful. And there's generally not a lot of recognition when you do swoop in and solve those issues. So for all the reasons Joe said, I think it's not surprising me that over the next 3 years that it's going to be growing. I just would hope that it would go faster.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, John and I, we talked about that and this whole thing, and Joe and we talked with Gary about it earlier. The topic comes up. It's citizen developer, which really grates on me. One of our members with a major appliance manufacturer and distributor in Europe loves citizens developer. He thinks it's great. And when I asked him, well, what's the impact on IT? He says, well, we only have to do like 30,000 changes per year on the stuff they do. And I'm thinking, really? And you're happy with that? And to me, a citizen developer is almost like a euphemism. It's like putting lipstick on that pig of shadow IT. It just doesn't seem it's going to work, but it's happening more and more. I mean, and we had one of our members who actually, I'm not going to name any names, but they actually developed AI algorithms by crowdsourcing, having a global contest, a competition, and it was in the public space and they didn't care, but they got algorithms to help them and it worked. But do you really want to open the doors like that? Do you really want all that input? Is it helpful, or are you just building up something that's going to really hit you in the face later on?
Yeah, Gary, what's your reaction to that citizen developer issue? I was at a meeting this week with some CIOs, and that really divided the room between sort of the love-hate crowd. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm, kind of reacting to what Tim was saying. One of the things that I love about citizen developer is that innovation starts everywhere, right? It's not just somewhere in IT to be able to identify where these issues are. And employees a lot of them are very, very tech savvy. So in that aspect, being able to rapidly create value and being able to automate different systems, great. Creates a ton of tech debt, creates a lot of issues. All of a sudden you have an RPA out there, it breaks and it replaces 60 people, and all of a sudden the business is down. And then it's just like before, it comes back to IT and how do you fix it? Because there is a whole maintainability and supportability that citizen developer doesn't always take. So we're looking at a little different. It's more of using a system that's you don't have to be a full developer, but we're keeping it in IT. So a lot of the application supports, the BA, our development teams are creating reusable APIs. And then with this low code solution, they're looking at, how do we build these connections? Because it is in IT, it's application support. They need to be able to support it. So citizen developer expanded outside of IT becomes a major, major challenge.
Yeah, Joe, what's your thought on that?
Well, I think what Gary just said is really smart. I think if you have APIs and sort of reusable components that people can put together within some sort of boundaries, so you're not so worried about the impact of that. I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, I don't want to be a control freak, and Lord knows I've got enough on my plate. So if the business wants to change system configurations, if they want to, write some bots, have at it. On the other hand, I do know that ultimately I am responsible for systems that scale, perform, and it's secure. And so I have to think about what's worst case, what could happen. And we've seen a few situations where, like even one recently, there was a bot developed in our operations area that ended up having a real negative impact on the operations of our healthcare professionals, our doctors and nurses and case managers. And I'm trying to track down what in the world's happened here. And turns out it wasn't even something that IT did. Now, I don't think I would like to make a decision on sort of the worst case outliers, but I think you have to sort of, as much as possible, give the business some freedom to execute. The other thing that we did a few years ago, well, actually it's been quite a while now, we started a very small innovation garage, and we really advertised because what we wanted to do was have the business come to us and say, hey, I went to a conference or I read an article and I think this is really cool. Can we kick the tires on it? Can we do a little prototyping? And that gives us a way to sort of steer, maybe inform the person we already have something in-house that would work. So it's a way for us to not fully control, but also influence maybe in a real positive way that the business views as helpful.
That's great.
I think we're still trying to find the balance on that, but I think this wholesale citizen developer thing is, I don't buy that. I think that's a bit scary and can get out of control.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is take a modular Lego approach and pray that we don't have a Jenga scenario and everything collapses.
There's a quote from the show today, folks. That's a good one. So, one of the CIOs I spoke with this week, they talked about putting in a management system around the citizen development where if something ends up being used by more than 10 people, say, then it becomes an application that IT supports and makes sure it's upgraded and things like that. But it sounds like an area where there's still a lot to be thought through. So thanks for your reactions to that. I'd love to get your reactions in this next area, although my slides are not advancing, so I don't quite know what is up with that. Hang on a sec. See if we can't do it this way. Great. So we talked before about IT's role in driving innovation. This actually goes beyond and asks specifically, are you responsible for creating revenue-generating initiatives? So we see that 44% say they're actually managing a team tasked with creating new revenue-generating initiatives. Another 24% are part of a team that's doing that. And about a third say, no, my team is not responsible for new revenue-generating initiatives. So, Joe, I want to start with you on this. What's this like in your organization? Is IT directly responsible for generating revenue or leading the innovation of new revenue-generating initiatives? And is it a healthy thing to do that? Does it take the focus away from other areas that are perhaps more important?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I would say, first of all, we are not directly accountable for driving innovation. We are seen as a very critical partner. We have a diversified business group. It's also our strategy group, and they're always looking at new opportunities to partner or to invest. We have a great relationship with them, and they always call us in to get our take and to get our opinion, to help shape deals and that sort of thing, which is great. And then we partner very heavily on the digital side with our business leader there to drive innovation, but we're not solely responsible. And I was telling Gary and you all last week as we were thinking about these results that this is an area where I tend to criticize my own performance, and I'm constantly thinking about how do I really position myself to be more of a strategic leader. Sometimes I think, though, is that really even a realistic expectation for the CIO who already has a huge job? Are there enough hours in the day that we can ever really be that person? And I think some CIOs can. For me, I think it's probably more of a soft spot where I'm much better at partnering, but I don't believe I could do my job well on delivery and all the other things I'm responsible for and be on point to innovate, unless I were just be pulled out and carved out for a specific initiative. So I think we're always trying to prove our value, and we get invited early to the table, which to me is very validating that we are adding value. But no, we do not directly drive innovation, and I don't know that we'll ever be called on to do that, honestly.
Gary, what about for you at TruStone?
Yeah, so at TruStone, as far as looking at the digital banking channel, that is an IT responsibility. So my solution architect in charge of development, his responsibility is also called the VP of Innovation. So he's hitting conferences along with others and looking at all the different fintechs that are out there and understanding the business and understanding how can it remove friction, how can it solve problems, how can it meet our members' needs. And he looks not only just now, but also on the horizon and beyond the horizon. So we are responsible for driving revenue. And I know there's a slide in the broader one where you see that the title of a lot of CIOs or the folks that responded to this are Chief Digital Officer. And I know in the FIs, you'll see that we're beginning to see more of CTOs also becoming Chief Digital Officers. Jack Henry's a great example where their CTO is now called Chief Digital Officer and CTO. So it's a big aspect. Super exciting. I think I said last time it was being a CIO in 2023 is something that's no better job to have because we understand the technology and how we can leverage it better.
That's great. Tim, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know Joe said there's no direct pressure from the business to do these things. This is what you have to do and do it tomorrow. But I think there's increasing influence from the business side to focus on those revenue driving initiatives and maybe even get involved in the prioritization of projects this year and pulling them up and pushing things back in order to get revenue on the right track. One of the things I see though is, over the past couple of years or more, CIOs have been working to get IT people, the IT organization, more in line with the business, think about products, not projects, be more business oriented. And now we have this pressure from the business saying, we got to drive revenue. Is it a case of great expectations? Is that moving too fast and IT too slow to become more business aware?
I will say, Tim, I was thinking as you started to talk, one of the things I think CIOs really have to look for in talent is someone who really has the passion to look at things through your customer's eyes. If you have business partners who work with you and they see that your people have the passion and the ideas, they're willing to work hard for it, I think that goes a long way. I think the minute you have people that are going to dismiss ideas, tell you the reasons they won't work, talk about the scary reasons why you can't do it, you will very quickly have an IT organization that gets labeled as, the roadblockers, the naysayers, and they're going to go around you. They're going to figure out how to run the business, and ultimately could be to the demise of the IT department. So I think working on your brand is extremely important. You can't teach someone to have passion. You can't teach someone to have the same level of enthusiasm around innovating your business and serving your customers. So I think that has to be a key part of the recruiting process as we think about bringing in new talent to the IT organization in order to maintain a good level of credibility.
Yeah, and cupcakes in the break room don't hurt either. Gary, what about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Tim, I think you brought up a really great point around product alignment. And so having a product management council, having product owners, and that's a key aspect, just like Jo was saying, around that passion for the future and innovation. Having product owners that sit in the business, and you have technology owners that are aligned with them, and that is really which accelerates it. Because it's the business that's prioritizing. Yeah. And there are no no's. It's a yes and we'll get to it because this is the higher priority, and providing that visibility of what the priorities are for the organization, it changes the conversation. And so a product management council and a product alignment is what is the process that facilitates those discussions to happen. And that's, I would say any CIO, and I know most are already moving in that direction, but if you can accelerate that, that is just going to drive more and more success.
Great. And Jo,
if I could mention one
Please.
more thing, I think Gary is dead on. And one of the things I'm always telling my people, this is a little off topic, but sometimes the business, quite rightly, can underestimate the complexity and the effort of the things that we do, right? So they will have this huge list and they want it all tomorrow. And instead of leading with, oh God, let me tell you why that's going to be really hard. I always don't do that. Take a breath and say, man, that's really exciting. I see where you're going. If we could do that, then we could make this happen. Love it. Validate the idea and really listen, and then say, now we've got a couple of challenges we need to overcome. Let's talk through this. It's like you're pulling them in and you've got them, but you can't lead with, oh, we can't possibly do that this year because of da-da-da. That's a non-starter. And in their head, they're thinking, oh God, who am I going to go to make this happen? Because it's not that crew. And so I think it's really important for IT to learn how to partner and to learn how to say no in a way that still leaves people thinking you're all about it, you really want to help, and pull the business in to problem solving and prioritization. That cannot be left up to IT alone. You just can't do it.
And Jo, you teed that up really nicely in terms of perceptions, because these next slides are about perceptions of CIOs and the IT organization. So when we ask the CIOs what they're working on, then we take their responses and put them into different buckets that we've defined. So we're not asking CIOs to define whether they're business strategists or transformational leaders or functional leaders. Their responses in where they're spending their time puts them in the buckets. So you can see today that these transformational CIOs is the largest number, but where you can see people are striving, they really want to be this business strategist role, the strategic role. So in 3 to 4 years, over half are aspiring to be in this strategic role. And then these are the groups that they're saying they're going to work more with in the coming 3 years. And a good one is executive level administration, more of that communication with the CEO and line of business heads, operations, finance, accounting. But this slide is a slide that I think is fascinating because I mentioned at the outset that about 250 of the respondents are line of business respondents. And this is solely the line of business respondent. How does line of business view the CIO? And they could be risk assessors, where they're primarily looking at things based on risk and technology risk and business risk, strategic advisor, consultant, autonomous player, cautious voice of reason. Well, where you want to be is in this strategic advisor bucket, where you're proactively identifying business needs, making recommendations, really helping shape the business. But at this point, less than 40% of the CIOs would fit into that bucket, according to their line of business peers. So, Jo, what do you think about that? Is that the right view? Or we have a lot of work to do here?
We have some work to do, but on the whole, when I look at the 25%, which isn't terrible, being a consultant, and then the 38 strategic advisor, I don't think it's such a bad result. I do think that back to my earlier comment, and I don't mean to make it sound like, create fluff, but a lot of this really is perception. And it gets you an invitation to the table to be a strategic advisor. Having people who really understand the business in IT. And I think that we are in a unique position because we can see end to end programmatically how the business runs. But also things like, one of the things that we do every year, which my staff will tell you we'd rather have our fingernails pulled out, is we do an annual report. It's just an internal publication that goes out to the senior executives and says, what did you get for your investment in IT? And we work on that document to show how we contributed to bottom line or cost reduction or revenue generation, new products. Yes, we talk about getting the washout, but the whole point of that is to position us as somebody who can help realize our strategic vision for the future.
Yeah.
And then we also will annually refresh our tech strategy, make sure it really aligns with the business strategy, go around to every staff meeting of every senior vice president in the company, vet it, listen to feedback. I think sometimes doing little things like that can take you from being that consultant or good partner to, man, I'm going to pick up the phone and call IT because I've got an idea here.
Right. Gary, what's your take on this?
So I see this as actually a good thing. So when you look at 25% plus 38% from a strategic advisor and consultant, that's the majority, right? And just a small part, 13%, is the cautious voice of reason. So, Tim, I don't have the results from 2003, but I would imagine that's flipped quite a bit. And so I think that speaks to the leadership of the CIOs that responded to this survey, although they perceive themselves maybe not as strategic or business partner, the business sees them differently at a higher percentage.
Yeah.
So I think it's really neat. And Jo, I love your idea as far as kind of advertising the business value and presenting that forward. Up to
That's
the
great.
note of that. I don't necessarily see this as a bad thing, and we'll continue to, as a CIO group, try to move up the value chain, if you will.
That makes sense. Tim, any thoughts?
Yeah, getting back to my road trip in the DeLorean, which was a lot of fun, by the way. There are always going to be changes and uncertainties and business demands, and maybe that's why that 76%, it might be lower today, but it's sort of like steady for the last 2 decades. And Jo pointed out that the people who are really going to excel in IT are the ones that have business savvy and these new business skills and communication skills. So to me, that says, let's take a close look at the IT organization. Let's take a look at the structure and how they approach different things. And maybe it's time for some serious changes there. And I'm not sure, Jo, how you think. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that we try to do is bring people in and really give them a strong mentor and really expect them to learn the business. I love when I go into a meeting and people are arguing about the way things work, and the IT person can say, let me tell you how it works. And the business people are like, oh, okay, I love that. I love when you can't tell who's in the business and who's in IT. I do think it's incredibly important. Related to that, we have tried to grow some talent, pulling from business areas with mixed results. I don't think you're going to take somebody from the business and really make them a full stack developer. I think that's going to be difficult. We have seen, however, people come into IT from the business and make fantastic analysts and project managers based on expertise they have in the business, or even somebody doing, low code development on Salesforce who really gets the sales process. So I think it's not easy, but any way you can cultivate and create that deep business knowledge and combine it with technical capabilities, it's a huge win-win, and it allows you to be a different kind of IT shop. I do agree with Gary. I don't think these are particularly pessimistic. In fact, it's a little surprising, especially 38%, but I think we all have opportunity to build on that. It's just tricky to get out of the pressure of getting the washout and the day-to-day and the delivery and the operations to really kind of focus on that, which kind of goes back to our earlier discussion around it's exciting to be a CIO, but it's difficult because you're managing very different facets of the job.
Indeed.
Yeah,
and we are
mentioned,
actually, Tim,
people on the business side. people on the business side are come over to IT. Maybe there's a lawyer over there who really thinks logically, can work out as a data analyst.
Nobody said anything about lawyers.
Yeah. That's a step
Okay,
too
I'm
far.
sorry I broached the topic, but maybe if we have time, I know we're going to running out. I'm going to pass it back to John. We can talk a little bit about the upskilling activities. But we'll get back to
That's
that.
exactly where I wanted to go. In fact, I wanted to show three
All right.
slides here. We always ask about what skills are in demand, where are you planning to hire, and where are you having trouble hiring. So I want to go over this really quickly. This shows what skills are in demand, and we see a lot around cloud architecture, a lot around security, integration, which is, it never goes away as a really significant part of the IT role, change management, business relationship management, things like that becoming even more important as we rely more on as-a-service providers going forward. We also ask, where are you looking to hire in the next 6 to 12 months? Cybersecurity, application development, particularly around application DevOps, agile development, DevSecOps, data science, analytics, and you can see AI, machine learning on there as well. And then anything to do with cloud, there's a number of cloud-related things in there as well. What's going to be difficult? What roles will be difficult to fill? Cybersecurity. I'm going to get back to blockchain because that's a surprise. We almost never see blockchain come up in our surveys. Data science, analytics, AI, machine learning, enterprise architecture, robotic process automation. So Gary and Joe, we hear over and over about the challenges of finding people, retaining them, or reskilling them. Gary, let's start with you. Can you just talk about your strategy around people today? What's working for you? How are you getting the things you need? And how are you hanging on to those people?
Yeah, I think there's a couple areas that we do. So we have hired tech savvy folks from the line of businesses. We have a developer or a application support who was a teller and from operations. And so, and the thing that attracts people to IT is one, the exciting stuff that we're working on, their natural tendency to technology, as well as the culture that you put in there within your organization around collaboration and integrity and things like that. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is looking at the skills itself. And when I looked at these results, what I saw was that we were all kind of competing for the same skill sets and the talent. And so compensation and benefits and culture and working on exciting things, I think that's what helps attract talent.
Yeah.
Culture
Joe,
helps reach good leadership.
Yeah, agreed 100% with that. Joe, what's your take and what's your strategy here? What's the people strategy?
Well, this is a problem all CIOs are faced with. And the bottom line is the supply is just not keeping up with the demand. You could say yes to any of these roles. I think we're going to have to get creative. I think we got to stop chasing the same limited talent and focus on growing pipelines, which means some delayed gratification. We are working with an organization that specifically targets underprivileged young people, gives them technical training, and then a lot of non-technical training, sponsors them in the organization, and then ultimately, after trying an internship, you can hire them. For us, it's a win-win because it's a way to grow talent and also meet some diversity goals that we have. But I think once you have the talent, you have to intentionally really focus on your culture and how you keep them. Yesterday we had a new employee. We used to be a breakfast when we were in person, but it's a new employee orientation session where my VPs and I come in. We meet every single person. We understand where they came from, and we give them an overview of IT, kind of a little mini dive on each of the areas, our key initiatives. We give them the operating plan, strategy, the company, try to make sure they have a good base level of understanding versus them fumbling for 6 months. And the questions we ask in that meeting are, why did you come to work here? And what's important to you? What do we need to be doing more of or less of? We won the Computer World Top 100 Places to Work in IT for the 7th time. We're thrilled about that. But that's not by luck. It is by a lot of hard work to build a culture where people want to be. And you're always going to lose people who chase money. And Lord knows, we all know the past couple of years, there was a lot of money being thrown at some of our top talent. I'll tell you what we do in those situations. We maintain contact with those people. We take them to lunch. We talk to them on LinkedIn. because there is a chance they could come back. There's a chance they may find that the culture is better where we are. So I think it's a lot of little things that you have to do to intentionally build a culture and talk to your employees and find out what they like, what they don't like, and to the extent possible, keep doing more of the things that are working and find ways to change those that are not or that are irritants.
Yeah, and Tim, we only have a couple minutes left, but did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on this?
Yeah, very quickly. I think there's always going to be difficulties surrounding getting really experienced people in talent. It's been there for a long time. It's going to continue to be there. I think the key to moving in the right direction is to look at employee career journeys. Work very closely with people to find out what they like, not only what their skills are, but where they want to go, to get them involved in going down that path and sincerely help them go down that path. Too many organizations try to fit people into that square job responsibility slot, and it's not working.
Yeah, and I wonder just really quickly, we've just seen, tens of thousands of layoffs in the tech industry, not enterprise tech, but in the tech industry, Microsoft, Google, other companies like that. Are you expecting this is going to make hiring any easier? Just really quickly, Gary, do you think this creates a new pool of folks to hire from?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, the positions that we have posted now, we're seeing more and more applicants. So, so
Well, hopefully
as far
that's
as
some good news.
providing them opportunities, and I love what you said, Tim. Having career paths are absolutely critical. So,
Great.
yes.
Well, I think we have time to do a lightning round question, and I really wanted to get to this. It's about ESG, so we can put this slide up. This is the first year we asked about environmental, social, and governance issues. And you can see these are three different questions that we asked, but they really all around: is it going to shape your buying and your interactions with vendors? Number one, and how your organization is dealing with it. Jo, just really quickly, how is ESG shaping what you're doing?
We are very much in the nascent phases of ESG.
Yeah.
We are beginning to gather reports from our key suppliers and to set a strategy for ourselves. I'll be honest, when I thought about this topic, I tended to think about things like manufacturing and industries completely outside of my own, till I looked at some statistics around data centers and how we contribute to the carbon footprint. And while a lot of that we don't directly control, as you said, we can certainly control it by our decisions around which suppliers we use. So we're in the beginning phases of shaping our strategy. I think it's going to go from a nice to have to something you have to have for your key stakeholders going forward. So everybody should be focused on it.
Great. And Gary, did you have any quick thoughts on that?
Oh, I would agree. We're really, really in their beginning stage, and so we're still in the process of looking how do we tie it in. But to Joe's point, it's the right thing to do. So we absolutely have to do it, and it's also key to attract talent.
And Tim, as we wrap up, we've covered a lot of ground in this session. Just really like to know, are there any key thoughts that you have as we part company?
Yeah, no, I think 23 is going to be a year of challenges. More uncertainties, I think, but we're more apt to deal with them. I think we're in better shape than we were certainly 2 years ago. And the technology is going to help us enormously. AI, machine learning, RPA to help, get rid of mundane jobs and move people into better positions. So I think we're smarter and we're more apt to go in the right direction this time.
That's great. So as I mentioned, these are some of the highlights or some of the key issues that were pointed up in the 2023 State of the CIO Survey, but we'd love to get you the full survey so you can see all the results. Jo said something interesting a moment ago. She said they asked, why did you come to work here? Well, I came to work at Foundry and CIO and to work with my colleagues at the CEC because they're brilliant people and I always learn a lot. So I want to take a moment, thank my longtime colleague, Tim. Thanks very much for joining us today. And Jo and Gary, what a pleasure to talk with you and really to have you shed light on all of these issues. So thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, John. Nicely said. And I'd like to thank the audience as well. And kudos to our support person behind the scenes. You don't see her, but she's there all the time, Robin Clausen.
Yeah, great job by Robin. So thank you all. And
Thank
you all
you.
and thanks everyone for joining us. It's a pleasure to be with you.